Hi, hotties and thotties and house guests. Welcome back to the Real Housecast of North Hollywood. I'm your host, Carson Frey. It is our book club episode. Today, we are going to be talking about Love Me As I Am by Garcelle Beauvais. I really wanted to do this book. One, we're in Beverly Hills season. She's on TV, so let's talk about it. I also wanted to do this book because of for political reasons. I know and see that immigrants are being attacked in this country right now, so I really wanted to do a Bravo memoir that highlighted the immigrant experience. So that's why I chose Garcelle. So as a reminder for book club, I'm going to give you a cute, quick little summary, but then the second half is always my interview with my grandmother, who is a literary queen, but has never seen Housewives or really any reality show. We just try to have an intergenerational conversation. She likes books, I like TV. This is where it kind of comes together and we learn about each other every week. I love doing book club. So before we jump into that, whether you read the book or just want to sound like you did, let's just kind of go over Love Me As I Am by Garcelle Beauvais. So the introduction, who is Garcelle? So it's really about Garcelle setting the stage for what she's going to talk about in the book. She kind of gives us a taste of her journey from Haiti to Hollywood and kind of everything in between. Honesty. She tells us she's going to be honest about all the lessons she learned, and she's going to give us a little bit of tea. Now, chapter 1. So it's all about her childhood in Haiti. So it's about her growing up in Haiti, full of life, full of joy, how she saw it, how beautiful Haiti was, how fun her life was, how curious she was. And then boom, her mom moves to the U.S. and brings all of her siblings to the U.S. There's an obvious culture shock, especially because they first go to the East Coast. Haiti is warm. It's like humid. And then just to be in the frigid cold in the winter, it was beyond insane to Garcelle. And there's also huge language barriers. She didn't know English. And then just the typical immigrant starting a new life, how scary it is. And she starts to discover like what her American dream is and like the wild ride she's going to go on. And then chapter 2 goes into like model behavior. So it's like she's gorgeous, she's skinny, she's tall. She comes to America and they're like, you should be a model. But the modeling world is not all glitz and glam. There's like a ton of racism and just overall power struggles. The modeling world also opened doors, but it teaches her how to have fun and laugh and also like love luxury. So chapter 3, really more about her acting career. So it really dives into her early acting days from being on the Jamie Foxx show, being in Coming to America. And a lot of this chapter is like, again, the racism of the industry. The modeling racism and the acting industry racism, similar but a little different. And she's like fighting for every opportunity. Like she's starting to take off and get a little famous, but then also like experiencing a lot of racism and also the feeling of like there can only be one of us. So chapter 4, love, marriage, and all the time she's been betrayed by men. That's a lot of this book. Garcelle being betrayed by men. So she talks us through all of her relationships. First to her first husband, Daniel, who is a producer, and that's Oliver's dad. And then obviously her relationship with Mike, super famous. She talks about the affair with Mike. She doesn't go more into detail in the book than she does on the show. It's about the same. And she also talks about a little bit in this chapter, like her relationship with her dad, and it kind of lines up who her dad was as a husband to her mom, and then kind of how she looked to her men. And then the next chapter is like, I'm a mom first, everything else is second. So it kind of talks about how she's like having these career highs and lows, but she's all about her 3 boys, as we know from watching the show. She talks about like being a single mom, what that's really like, co-parenting with an ex who did her dirty, and how she finds balance just kind of in the chaos of having 3 boys. One thing that's to keep in mind with this book is she doesn't go from top to bottom. From like, I was a kid here, each chapter kind of has a theme. So it's like, this is the mom one, this is the ex one. So it's like, you're like, wait, you're divorced? So, and Grammie and I get into that. Okay, so chapter 6. So it's really about how she like continues to like survive in Hollywood. It's really how she perseveres through like really, really hard things. She talks about, again, more racism, sexism, pay gaps in the entertainment. She talks about how she's had to fight for representation, how she speaks up for herself, and how she thinks she's paving the way for future generations. She talks a lot about in this chapter how she thinks there should be more seats at the table and her wanting to include Black women more. And then we get into the Real Housewives, what I came here for. You probably did too. Grammie read this book. I was like, what? I don't understand this chapter because Grammie doesn't watch Housewives. So Garcelle enters this crazy world of reality TV. She had a little bit experience with like a modeling show a few years before, but really nothing like Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She talks about being the first Black housewife, kind of the racism she endured, and she talks about how she feels about each of the women right here. In the interview with Grammie, we talk a lot about her interaction with Kyle, which is brought up again, her first reunion, so whenever that was, the 2019 season, the year before the pandemic, and then it's brought up again at the beginning of the pandemic season. And then next chapter, she really starts to talk about her friendships in Hollywood, friendships in Housewife, how tricky both are. Probably Housewife, she says, is the trickiest. She reflects on all of her friendships and how they lifted her up, and times where her friends betrayed her and how it made her question everything. She always talks about the love, too, of a good frenemy. Like, she had quite a few frenemies mentioned in the book, and I think that is kind of her thing, knowing Garcelle. Chapter 9 is really know your worth, know yourself more. So she talks about how she's moving forward, how she's learning how to self-love, setting boundaries. She's not shrinking herself for anyone, especially a man. She's owning her story, her success, her future. This is when chapter-wise it all started to like kind of blend for me. Because then it kind of goes into the epilogue, which she's like, I'm not perfect, but I'm so real. I'm so, so real. She wants to inspire others. She wants to stand in her truth, love herself, and demand respect. So yeah. I don't know how I felt about this book. Maybe it kind of felt like PR. But I do really like Garcelle on the show. I don't know, though. It's always changing every week. Right now, I like Garcelle, but who's to say what's going to happen next week on Housewives? But without further ado, let's just jump into the interview with my Grammie. Hi, Grammie. Welcome back to the Real House Guest of North Hollywood. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, Carson Frey, and I'm delighted to be here.
For our book club, our monthly book club.
Oh, I love it.
So, as I discussed earlier in the summary, we're reading Love Me As I Am by Garcelle Beauvais. Of course, as we always talk about, Grammie's never seen Housewives, so of course she's never seen The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Did you have any, exposure to Garcelle as, an actress, or was it all brand new for you?
You know, after she talked about the places she had been, mm-hmm. I remembered seeing her, but I didn't recognize her as, how often you'll see character actors or people do bit parts and mm-hmm. you don't really remember them.
Yeah, and I specifically chose this book for this month because I wanted to really cover an immigrant, and just with everything happening politically right now, if our little way is, just trying to read a book, that's our little way. And the book kind of really started with her in Haiti, Did anything kind of stand out about her like childhood experiences in Haiti and how they shaped her?
Well, I was interested because my only experience about Haiti, other than that my cousin was there with the embassy, I think, for a few years, but was with reading about Paul Farmer and his work with, the poor people and the sick. And so this was a totally different look at Haiti from a middle class family.
Yeah.
And I was really glad to get that viewpoint.
Yeah, because I really don't know much about Haiti other than like trauma, earthquakes, orphans. That's kind of, I feel like, as Americans, what we're exposed to. I did like the parts when she described her childhood in Haiti, like walking through, walking to school and wearing her uniform and just the sense of community she experienced. It feels very opposite of Los Angeles.
Yes, and I liked when she described all the music and the colors of Haiti.
Yeah, the colors really stuck out to me too because I think a lot of colors do, like places and colors kind of run together, and it really painted more of a visual for that part. And she didn't really do that as much in the other chapters of really painting us through it, which I liked that in the Haiti part. She then described her family's move to the US and all the cultural adjustments. How did you interpret her feelings about being an outsider?
Oh, I just felt so sorry for her, and I thought how hard that it must be for so many immigrants, and particularly if you're Black, and then to come into a white school and adjusting to the cold weather. I mean, they really have major adjustments, and I don't know how they did it. I think people don't appreciate always how really tough it is to immigrate to another country.
Yeah, and I thought too in that part, we saw her obviously as an outsider in American culture, but she was a little bit of an outsider in Haitian culture as well. She seemed to be on the younger side. Like, she was pretty young when they immigrated, and she talked about her body type a lot being so different. Like, she was really skinny and, like, not this, like, bodacious woman. So I think being an outsider is part of a huge defying part of her identity I saw. It's like even with each, she was a little different, which kind of is interesting when you think about her being the first Black woman in the Beverly Hills cast, It's like no stranger
Yes.
to being an outsider.
Well, I think she brought forth a lot of the problems that Blacks have faced, and Chinese too, or other cultures in participating in America's society. I mean, how they have to jump through hoops, and really, I'm amazed at her.
I am too. So this memoir was a lot different in how it was written. It wasn't, and you and I talked about this, we were like, it's not linear at all. And so each chapter is kind of like a different section of her, but it doesn't really follow a linear fashion. So to kind of jump ahead into the modeling and acting part, because I think it kind of leads into, do you think her experiences in Hollywood kind of reflect the larger issues of representation in the media?
I do, yeah, and you're right. It was a little different kind of memoir than we're used to reading, but yeah, I wanted more of the behind the scenes in Hollywood. I was a little sorry we didn't get more information about that.
I felt like she kept giving us tidbits of like, oh, girl, it was so crazy. This really crazy thing happened. I almost was hurt. And it's like, but what's the crazy thing,
Exactly. Like, I think she talked something about an email that she sent out. And tell us more. I don't know anything about that email. So
yeah, and that email too she talked about it a ton on Beverly Hills. So I think she probably wrote the book for a Bravo viewer, but she also talks about how she's not just a Bravo celebrity. She's not just a housewife. She's an actress. She's an author. She's a model. And so I wish she would have wrote the book maybe because I felt like she wrote it for the Beverly Hills house viewers, but what about the people who watched her on the Jamie Foxx show and don't know about the email? Because I love the email. I thought I wanted more about the email in the book, because when I watched her on the show, So the email Grammy, she basically sent it to everyone, being like, every single one of you, he has been cheating on me. Like, she was not nice. She wrote a long email, and he worked at, or he still does, he works at CAA, which is like the biggest agency ever, like Brad Pitt's agent, you know? And so she emailed everyone at CAA. So she basically told everyone in their industry that he was cheating on her while she was trying to get pregnant through IVF. And I also, you and I brought up, so if the cheating happened for 5 years and she found out when the boys were 2 or 3, they were in car seats. So that meant he was cheating on her while she was going through IVF, which I wish she would have brought that out more. You know?
I feel like we skipped over a lot of just parts about her life I would have liked to have known more about.
I'm skipping ahead, but she gave a little bit about her IVF journey, but I wanted more about, like, I know, like, she did 2 rounds of IVF, she had a miscarriage, all that, but I wanted more information about how it, like, made her feel.
Yes. She talked a lot about, some of her book was almost like not a self-help, but one of those inspirational type things. But not as personal, I guess, as I would have liked.
And she's kind of known for being, maybe not like being super open on the show, but very personable. Like, she doesn't always have her own storyline, but like if one of the women was going through IVF, that's when she would chime in to tell her story. If that makes sense, which it kind of felt like that for certain parts of the book. So I would say most of the book, though, is about like her marriages and like the relationships with that. What do you think about how she approached love and self-worth?
She really thinks a lot about it, I think, about what she wants in a man. I mean, I was impressed that, like, one guy she got rid of because he didn't buy her tickets. And I was rooting for her. I thought, if he's not going to buy her tickets for this show, then, he's not worth it. But, yeah, there was a lot. I didn't care for the pages describing her fantasy wedding. That just didn't interest me.
I wanted to know about her actual weddings. We didn't get any information on the actual weddings, but we know all about her dream fantasy wedding that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I agree. I want to hear about what's really going on, which is why I read a memoir. I want to hear, and there were some things she did well. I mean, she did do, like I enjoyed her description of trying out for The View what was going on there. Because some of those shows I watch, and I want to hear the behind the scenes, what's going on. And I tried to look her up, like the books. I wanted to order the children's books for my great grandson, and it took a while, to find them.
Yeah, when we realized that, when you're like, is this right in the book? And I tried to find it too. It felt like she kind of stretched how big it was, or maybe it was big to her. It was strange because I felt like I was trying to fact check her, which I shouldn't feel like that. I should have like this like trust, of my author and telling us. And she's very candid though about like divorce and co-parenting. Did anything on her like reflections with motherhood resonate with you?
Well, I thought she handled the story of her older son and his addiction problems well, because like she said, it's his story to tell. And you can tell she's very proud of her kids and seems to enjoy them. And yeah, I really think she's a good mother. I do too. I mean, that came across to me, that motherhood's important to her and she's a good mother.
I think it's interesting because like she obviously has not trouble finding a man, but finding the right man for her. And she tracks it back to her dad, you know, of his absent and coming in and out and how her mother just allowed it. And I find it really interesting. She had 3 sons. It's like men have always been like this constant issue. And I've heard from, I think it was like an astrologist or something, but they were like, if you have issues with men, if you become a mother, you will have a son. You know, like it's just kind of like, and I think it's interesting kind of her approach to finding like resolution is almost within how she parents. I don't know.
Yes. I didn't care for her dad at all. And I will, she liked her mother and I think her mother did a good job with rearing her, but when her mother took her dad back in, I don't understand that. I
thought it was very representative of how she kind of described her culture.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Of like, just kind of like these strong women who do everything, but they're taught almost to take abuse in a way. And I think sometimes as women, we think of abuse as just a man hitting you, but a man not being emotionally there for you in a partnership when you have how many children, that is abuse, I think.
That's abusive. Yes.
You know?
Yes. And I hope she finds a man that will, because she is a strong woman and it does take a strong man to deal with that.
I think one thing maybe the book she comes to a resolution is, I don't need a man. And maybe she was saying that at the beginning, but it felt like with her choices and how she kind of moved through things that she did maybe really need a partner at that time. She needed that. But I feel like the way she's navigated, she's realized like, oh, I'm good on my own. You know, I have the capability.
True, although she seems to have a strong interest in having sex. So maybe just having a sexual partner, a friend with benefits.
Friends with benefits. Yeah, what do you think of all the sex talk, all the how to give a blowjob? What was your reaction to that?
Oh, well, that was kind of a shock to me. I'm not a prude by any means, but I'm not used to reading that in a memoir.
In a memoir, it felt, but I also thought maybe there's a lot of shame, it feels like, with sex in her culture. So it's like maybe that was her way of like, all right, I'm putting an imprint how I give a blowjob.
And good for her. You know, it didn't offend me. It was just kind of where I started keeping a track of how many times she mentioned a penis.
I thought it was also funny because on Beverly Hills, so that's the show she was on, there's another woman named Lisa Rinna. And they talked about, there was a scene, I forget what season, but they're basically like, her daughters tell her, who are like probably 14, 15 years old at the time of the scene, they're like, yeah, Mom, we read your memoir and you talked about how to give a blowjob. So that's how we learned how to give a blowjob. And I was thinking about that a little bit in the book. I was
yeah.
The Beverly Hills women love to do a little teaching moment in their memoirs. One thing I do really liked was how she like kind of discussed friendship. I like that she gave it its own section, because if you're going to give all these men their own chapters, at least give your friends one. But a lot of it was about like shifting betrayals in Hollywood and her personal life. How do you think she handled conflict with like women?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. Yeah. I really didn't. I don't think she's comfortable with conflict, although that one time I think she handled it well, where she sat down and talked to, this person, and it apparently got some kudos from the producers for how well she handled it. I liked her description of her front row friends. And I thought, we have those, but I'd never heard it called front row.
I like that word too, because it's like a way in, I think for our minds sometimes, at least with me, I have a lot of friends, but if one, I'm like, why aren't they there for me? Why aren't they like being there for me in the way I am? It's a way to be like, they're not a front row friend, They might be a middle row friend, but not a front row friend. So it's like kind of changes your expectations. And like, do you have friends like that? Like, okay, like we can like talk, but not like, I'm not going to be that vulnerable with you because I don't think you can handle it, or not handle it, but
Yes.
I don't want to give you that.
Absolutely. Because in reading this, I thought about, okay, I have those friends who I can just talk about anything with. Then there are those that I can talk about a lot of things with, but I don't want to get too personal.
Has that changed as you've gotten older? Like, do you feel like as you get older, you can like define it, or does it get more confusing?
Now, I think I've had different friends at different points in my life, but
Mm-hmm.
as I get older, my women friends are much more important.
Yeah.
And although I have a couple of male friends now who are important to me too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I'm
I,
closer to some of the women I know.
I thought with Garcelle, like, she sometimes was too forgiving in ways, and or too forgiving to men, but like not as forgiving towards the women. So that was like a little like different for me, because I felt like I don't know, like if her husband had an affair for 5 years, I don't know, like maybe there were red flags she didn't see, but I feel like she's quick to see the red flags within her friends. But that moment she talked about with Kyle, when she kind of described like the racism essentially within that, I remember watching that in real time. And,
Mhm.
you know, I think it was during the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020. So like Kyle needed to be called out in the way, and she does it very gently, which I loved that moment on the show. And I like that she chose to talk about it as well, because it was a defining moment for her on the show, because we've never had a Black person in this cast. So seeing how they
Right.
navigate race was interesting. So towards the end, she talked a lot about balancing motherhood and finding passion. How do you see her journey compared to like other memoirs we've read?
Uh, I I think it's harder. I mean, it was harder because she was a Black woman. Although we did one other Black woman,
Portia. Yeah.
Portia. Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like
Hmm.
this time we didn't get a good sense of who she was as a person. We got a
Yeah.
lot about what she believes and what she wants to be. But
Yeah.
I mean, with Portia, I felt like I could have sat down and talked to her. I don't feel that connection with this one.
Yeah, I feel the same, like, because I do think it's not fair to compare her to some of the white women we've read, because it's just so different. Like,
Totally, totally.
it's a completely different thing. And what we were drawn about was like kind of her outsider's view, which we didn't get as much. Um, and that kind of, so I felt like a lot of it, because I talked about how this is a ghostwriter one. And every time we read a book, I investigate, is there a ghostwriter? How public they are about it. And on this one, the book's back there, it says, you know, my journey from Haiti to Hollywood, or written with Nicole E. Smith on the cover. And in
Yes.
the acknowledgments, she kind of acknowledges her as a co-author. And I, of course, looked this woman up, and this is the only book she's written, and her other work tends to be in PR, which immediately then, as a reader, I was a little distrusting, because it kind of came off as a PR relations. Did this, like, impact your engagement with the book?
Yes, I think that's it exactly. Because once you told me that it was written with the PR person, then I could understand. Because when I was reading it, it was like, why is she going through all these pages of saying, you know, how wonderful she is, basically?
Yeah.
And instead of just telling me about her life and let me see how wonderful she was. So I'm curious on how they work together and how it was written.
Do you think, is there a difference between the term ghostwriter and co-writer, or is it just different words for the same thing?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think co-writer to me says that they both came up with a lot of the wording and the Like I'll write one chapter, you write the other, or so forth.
It might have been that too. I would love to like understand more of the process of writing these books. And I have a ghostwriter friend I think we'll have on eventually to like maybe chat with us, because I do find that fascinating. But maybe I think it impacts the authenticity of like how we perceive everything.
I agree. I agree because I know that I've heard of other people who co-written books, and they do that. I'll write this, you write this part, and as a reader, often you can tell who wrote what. While a ghostwriter, as far as you know, the person who the book's about wrote it all.
Yeah, which it's just from their point of view, essentially, because it's almost like a biography with just like I statements instead.
Exactly.
Do you think ghostwriters should have acknowledgments or have credits on the book cover? Like, do you think they should all, like, because Garcelle does acknowledge it. It's on the cover. It's in the back of the book. And I imagine, so I did find Portia had a ghostwriter co-author as well. And Craig, who is the one I did without you, he had one, and they all acknowledged it, and that's it. So I know Carol didn't. She's famously said she does not use ghostwriters or co-writers on the show.
Right.
And you could feel that.
She was a journalist, so she was used to writing.
Yeah, but you could feel it in the book. Can't find anything about Stassi having a co-writer. Heather, I couldn't find anything as well. And so I'm curious, like, do you think they should be required by, law to say this was co-written?
I don't know. And because I think it makes a difference if the story and everything in it is all from the one person, and then a ghostwriter just takes those words and pretties them up and makes it easier to read. Yeah. There's not the work involved as somebody who sits and actually writes all of it. I don't know, Carson. I'd never thought about this before.
Until I convinced you to read a memoir every month. And because I do think it tells us, and I do think people should be allowed to tell their story. And I think writing books is hard. Like, I could not sit down and write a memoir right now.
No, I couldn't either.
It's a skill, the same way we wouldn't ask someone who hasn't gone to medical school to like operate on us, So, a ghostwriter, co-writer allows someone who, because Garcelle's on a show that she doesn't know, she knows what she films and what she says. She doesn't know what will be edited, what will be in the story, how it will be edited. So it gives her a good chance to like tell the story in her own words. But I don't know. I don't know either. I think the question might be more interesting than the answer.
True. Yeah, I guess I would be curious to talk to some ghostwriters and find out how it worked.
Yeah, and I wonder like because I think they might have been friends before as well. So like, how would it be co-writing or writing your best friend's story? Like, how would I write your memoir? You
want to try it?
I'm good. I know I won't even have a fourth of it down. Is there any other thoughts or anything else you want to say about the book?
I'm glad I read it. It wasn't my favorite because it was harder for me to follow and get a sense of her. And I miss that because I think, I'm impressed with all she's done. 17 years old and living in New York City. And oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. I'm glad we read it. And I'm also to be an immigrant, which particularly nowadays, has got to be even more difficult.
Especially too, like, I feel like Black immigrants have a unique experience as well, because being Black in America is its own hard thing. And she talks about it, she talks about giving her son the talk about how to act with police officers, and being an immigrant has its own things that come with it. So those two together, you know, and to be then on, like, it's not like she's on Real Housewives of Potomac, Miami, Atlanta, these shows that are known for being more diverse.
Yeah,
She's
right.
on the show that's known for being whitey, white, 90210, bougie as it gets. And that, you know, she was a little girl from Haiti that never graduated high school. That's like now up there with kicking it with the Hiltons.
Exactly. I just think, wow. So I'm impressed with her.
I am too. What I guess was hardest for me about this book was I felt like I got more of her watching her on the show. And I always want the reverse to happen. I always want to like read the book and be like, oh my God, I didn't know how cool you were. So how many olives do you give this book, Grammie?
Well, I've thought about it, and I've decided this is a 3 olive martini tonight.
Okay, 3 olives.
Yep, 3 olives. So,
well, I should give it 3, but because I didn't learn more about her from the book than I did the show, she's getting only 2 from me. But cheers to Garcelle.
Since I'm drinking the martini, I'll keep my 3.
Keep the 3. Yay, cheers. Perfect. Well, thank you guys for listening. We will announce our next book club soon. We do this every month. Thank you guys so much.
Bye, Carson.